Earth Mother, Star Mother, you who are called by 1,000 names, may all remember we are cells in your body and dance together. You are the grain and the loaf that sustains us each day. And as you are patient with our struggles to learn, so shall we be patient with ourselves and each other. We are radiant light and sacred dark, the balance. You are the embrace that heartens and the freedom beyond fear. Within you we are born, we grow, live, and die. You bring us around the circle to rebirth. Within us you dance forever. Earth Mother, Star Mother, you who are called by 1,000 names, may all remember we are cells in your body and dance together. You are the grain and the loaf that sustains us each day. And as you are patient with our struggles to learn, so shall we be patient with ourselves and each other. We are radiant light and sacred dark, the balance. You are the embrace that heartens and the freedom beyond fear. Within you we are born, we grow, live, and die. You bring us around the circle to rebirth. Within us, you dance forever. Good morning and welcome to this Wednesday episode of the Integrating Jewel. Happy Earth Day to all of you. Our beginning prayer this day comes from the book of Earth Prayers, written by Starhawk. A prayer by Starhawk this day, our first jewel of wisdom to integrate. As we gather in this place, as we come home to our body, to our breath, in this seat, in this time, in this place, on this earth, I invite you to take a couple deep breaths together with me at your own pace. To fill your lungs fully as your belly expands, and to hold that for just a few moments. And then when you're ready, to gently release that air, letting go of all tension, letting go of all that you hold on to. You contract the belly. And every last breath of air, you let go of. Maybe you'll notice that as you squeeze out and let go of every last breath of air, you hold in that liminal, that in-between space for just a short bit, that then you are ready very naturally to breathe in a deep, full breath. The breath of life, the breath of love, the Ruach in the ancient Hebrew, the Holy Spirit, the life force, the Tao. And as we settle in and take a few breaths, I invite you to take notice of where your body is touching the earth, where your body is touching the seat that you're in, the feeling of sensation of the skin, or the legs, or the feet, or the backside, or the back, or whatever it is that's touching the seat that you're in. And just recognize for a moment, with a smile and bow and a word of thanks to Mother Earth for holding us in her warm embrace in this moment. And as we celebrate Earth Day this day, it seems appropriate to me that we begin, after our initial prayer, our second jewel today, the Elements song that comes from Sister Nghiem and the Plum Village community of Thich Nhat Hanh. So I invite you to sing, chant along as you feel led from where you're at, and just to settle in and feel yourself deeply rooted, deeply held, deeply embraced and loved by the earth and the elements of creation.
Spirit of the earth, I feel you growing me. Awaken, Spirit of the earth, I feel you growing me. I am whole. I am whole. I am whole. I am whole.
You are whole. You are home. We are whole. We are home. In this body, in this breath, in this moment, in this seat, in this time and place. We are whole. We are home. Our third jewel of wisdom this day comes from what has become our chapter a day from the Tao Te Ching, the ancient Chinese tradition and perspective from the time before Christ. Today is chapter 26. The heavy is the root of the light. The unmoved is the source of all movement. The heavy is the root of the light. The unmoved is the source of all movement. Thus the master travels all day without leaving home. However splendid the views, she stays serenely in herself. Thus the master travels all day without leaving home. However splendid the views, she stays serenely in herself. Why should the lord of the country flit about like a fool? If you let yourself be blown to and fro, you lose touch with your root. If you let restlessness move you, you lose touch with who you are. Our fourth jewel this day, to hear and receive as we rest in the presence of love, in the presence of God, the presence of the Holy One, comes from the Old Testament Christian scriptures. Again, the story of Jonah. We read the first chapter. We received the gift of the first chapter yesterday. Today, we received the gift of the second chapter. We practice hearing these different perspectives in our ears, in our minds, but especially in our hearts and our beings. And we listen to what they have to say to one another, what the Holy One, what God, what the divine, what Mother Earth has to speak to us today, what words of love, of challenge, of comfort, of encouragement. So I invite you into the story of Jonah. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called to the Lord out of my distress, and the Lord answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. You cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. How shall I look again upon your holy temple? The waters closed in over me, the deep surrounded me, weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever, yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. As my life was ebbing away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who worship vain idols forsake their true loyalty, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to the fish, and it spewed Jonah out upon the dry land. If you let yourself be blown to and fro, you lose touch with your root. If you let restlessness move you, you lose touch with who you are. I love this story of Jonah, and I imagine that it's our story. I imagine that there are times in our lives where there are so many different energies and distractions and pushes and pulls and things that draw us away from our root, draw us away from the earth, draw us away from our bodies, from our breath, from this moment, from God, from the very presence of the Holy One indwelling in each and every one of us. And I imagine that there are times in our life where we go running and screaming, freaked out, away from what is. Perhaps it's pain, perhaps it's suffering, perhaps it's fear, perhaps it's anxiety, perhaps it's confusion, perhaps it's shame or guilt, or a combination of those things. And perhaps we can relate to Jonah. And perhaps as we've run screaming away from what is, those times in our life when we do that, those moments in our life where we do that, perhaps we experience something similar to Jonah. We experience being thrown into the seas and being swallowed up by a giant fish. And we experience being cast into the deep. We experience feeling separate from the Holy One, from God, disconnected from the earth, from one another. In the heart of the sea, the flood surrounding us, the waves and the billows passing over us, right? The waters closing in over us, the deep surrounding us, the weeds wrapped around our heads at the roots of the mountains. Hmm. And the gift of those moments, the gift of those times and the opportunities that those moments present to us again and again, and the invitation through Jonah, the invitation through the living Christ, the invitation from the Holy One in this moment, in every moment, the invitation of our times now in the midst of these radically unknowing, changing times, with the presence of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Our lives are changing and are different, and there's so much uncertainty, unknown, so much fear, so much loss and grief, and it's only going to mount. Do we run away screaming from that and hiding from that as Jonah did? And then do we experience the depths of the darkness and being flooded and being cut off from light and life and beauty and joy and goodness, the very love of God that is us? Yes, that is a choice that we make, and that is part of our human experience. And perhaps it's a part of our human experience to embrace and to feel the fullness of. And in the midst of that, to return to our bodies, to return to our breaths, to return to this moment, whatever it is that we're feeling and experiencing, to turn to the Holy One, to the presence of love in each breath, in each moment, within our hearts, within ourselves, within our beings, and to rest in that presence, to be healed by that presence, to be freed by that presence. And perhaps as we practice coming back to the moment in our bodies through our breath, Perhaps we too can experience the new life. Perhaps we too can experience the resurrected life. Perhaps we too can experience the goal of our quest, return to love. Perhaps we too can experience being spit out of the belly of the whale, out of the darkness, out of the depths, out of the fear, out of the illusion and the experience of separation. And we can land on dry land. We can land in the garden, in the kingdom of heaven, where we are one, where we experience the oneness and the interconnectedness of all of us and of all beings, where we experience the oneness of us with the Holy One. Our fifth and final jewel this day that we will end with is an earth prayer from Rumi. Rumi is a 13th century Persian poet who was born in what we now call Afghanistan in the Sufi tradition. The Sufi tradition is often described as the mystical arm of Islam. And so Rumi is often described as a 13th century Sufi mystical poet. Lord, the air smells good today, straight from the mysteries within the inner courts of God. A grace like new clothes thrown across the garden, free medicine for everybody. The trees in their prayer, the birds in praise, the first blue violets kneeling. Whatever came from being is caught up in being, drunkenly forgetting the way back. Thank you for spending these moments in this sacred space together, showing up as yourself. You are seen, you are loved, you are enough. Thank you for being you. May you be present this day. May you show up as your true self and offer whatever you have to offer, trusting and knowing that it is indeed enough. And perhaps this day, especially as we celebrate and give thanks for the earth and this Earth Day, perhaps you can take a walk and enjoy the trees and the birds and the spring blooms in an even deeper way. Perhaps you can sit in the grass and feel your body, feel your feet touching Mother Earth, being held, deeply rooted, deeply loved and embraced by the earth. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, 9 o'clock, where we gather together to receive the gifts of the jewels of wisdom from various faith traditions and practice being present with them, integrating them into our very hearts and beings. May you be caught up in being this day as you drunkenly, wildly, joyfully find your way back together. We'll end with the words from Rumi one more time. Lord, the air smells good today, straight from the mysteries within the inner courts of God. A grace like new clothes thrown across the garden, free medicine for everybody. The trees in their prayer, the birds in praise, the first blue violets kneeling. Whatever came from being is caught up in being. Whatever came from being is caught up in being, drunkenly forgetting the way back.